We
probably on
have
the
so we have a new poll up. What is, the number one space complaint you hear from employees? We're getting into that employee feedback. I'm really curious about where this one lands.
More even than I was expecting. All right. This is fun. This is a fun one watching this one. So we're
Sounds
pretty
fun.
even between can't find a meeting room, noise in open areas, and not enough quiet focus space. Um, Interesting. Okay. Uh, I would say that typically over the last few years, the can't find a meeting room has sort of jumped way above the others, as something that we hear from customers, we see in these conversations. Perhaps we were asking the question differently also at those
Hmm.
times. I think the quiet piece and the noise is just something that's persisted for so long in workplace and workplace design as one of the highest complaints. So not totally surprising to see it there.
One that's not on here that has been coming up quite a bit in working with customers is that they're actually being requested for more desks. And I'm curious if that's true for the audience as well. Have you been hearing requests for more desks? And what's bananas about this request is that when you look across the floor, more often than not, it's, partially vacant or that there's a number of available desks. And you're like, well, what's going on here? Like, why are people asking me for desks if there's so many available? And there's like this bias that we have, or this association of, our desire, a sense of belonging, and we associate the desk becomes the scapegoat. The desk is how we identify, our place within the office. And so if we don't have that, and we walk into the office, or maybe we're looking for a conference room, we might actually have a desk, but we can't find a conference room. So then we take it out on the desk and we go to our leadership and say, I can't find space. And there's not enough of that qualification of like, well, what do you mean by space there? And just kind of wanted to bring this up because we find more often than not, it's not necessarily the desk. It could be stuff at the desk. It could be phone booths. It could be adjacent conference rooms or meeting rooms. So it's just kind of an interesting problem that we've been coming across. So, oh man, okay, we're still lighting up here in the chat.
I love how talkative everyone is today.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just makes this way more fun and interesting for everyone. So thank you for all the participation. Um, yeah, I think, the one thing about the desks that is really interesting, maybe exciting about this year to pay attention to, right, is I think sometimes this desk request is real again. Um, not always, but a lot of our customers that we've seen have made some really good, um, very informed and also smart decisions around right sizing that
Hmm.
have allowed them to get to that space of like, asking if the desk problem is actually real again, which is a good thing that we're kind of looking at our floor plans in that way and trying to sort through it. That being said, let's talk about the supply demand challenge. Brad, this dirty dish example was a customer that you were working with closely. Talk us through it.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of interesting, what we were talking about earlier of there's a request, a complaint, and it takes some of this kind of more investigative like skill set to really get to the source of it. And here, the trigger was a dishwasher actually breaks. And then, this happens at home too. The dishes pile up in the kitchen. And then we start to see, there's a lot of stuff in the office, and we're like, well, what's going on here? There's a lot of stuff, and people are leaving their plates or maybe, some food at desks or, different things, different artifacts that really should be in the dishwasher. And so as we start to walk around the floor, we're noticing that, all this stuff is consuming the desks, and it gives us this perception that people are actually occupying those spaces when they've actually gone home or they've moved on to some other space. And so this creates like this spillover effect. And so, from an experience perspective, we're no longer, feeling comfortable to go sit at that desk with dirty dishes. I wouldn't want to sit at that desk. And so then the whole floor feels full, and people just, throw their hands up there, and there's this contradiction that happens where we're looking at the data and the data says, that there's plenty of desks available, yet qualitatively on the floor from, the BUs and the employees, they're coming to us saying that there's not enough space and it's like, well, where is this breakdown happening? And just wanted to highlight, this kind of idea of like following this thread or this symptom all the way down. So, it takes it's a little bit of work as far as like having these conversations with the stakeholders. I'm kind of curious, again, going back to the audience, like how are you navigating some of this? I think there's different methodologies, but to really dig in deeper into we have a symptom and what is the root cause of that symptom? What do we really need to dig into here? And Izzy, do you have any other things you want to?
No, I think you kind of covered it on this one. We maybe a little plug for our podcast episode with Ada. We talked about kind of this uh, dish kitchen experience and how the design and the just kind of the fallout from some of that very human behavior of the way we leave things in space, the way that we clean up after ourselves or don't, the way the kitchen's designed, right? All this stuff, how that's a specific sticking point for some workplaces. Um, I know I mentioned on the podcast that I always go in a new workplace and it's like I can't find the right trash can, recycle, compost spot right away, right? You kind of look
Yeah,
around. It's like everyone,
yeah.
some you go in the top, others are drawers, right? I did this today. They have beautiful little setup for us, but I was like looking for the drop-in space and it was a drawer and it was there. We got there, but anyways, all that experience matters. It also contributes to why sometimes employees leave these things out, right? Because they maybe
Yeah.
feel like there's a smooth process. So um, I think unless Brad, you want to touch on anything in the chat, we've got some good stuff. I think the next slide here is going to talk a little bit more about that supply demand challenge that we have around some of the design of spaces and kind of where things are breaking. So shortages at VergeSense is when 80% or more of a specific space type or space category is in use during the same hour, meaning if at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, there are shortages happening in my small conference rooms. That means 80% or more of the small conference rooms are already taken, and I go to find one, and I find there's a shortage. I have an experience friction there. It affects
Mhm.
my productivity. I might be late to meetings, and starts to become a part of something I remember about the workplace, potentially in a negative way or something that's kind of pushing me away from the space, maybe to come back or not, right? So what we're looking at here is the average shortage rates, so percentage of the time during these hours where we're seeing shortages in the different categories. And not surprisingly, lunchtime, not a lot of shortages, but we've got some pretty notable shortage between the 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. hours. And other than for open collaboration, which I think everyone that we work with has seen as a space that doesn't seem to be the friction point. Maybe it's good for spillover, but isn't usually causing as much of the challenge, other than there aren't a lot of those spaces. Brad, what are your thoughts on?
Just another note on Open Collab. Totally agree with you there. One thing I noticed, a client in London actually had designed their open collaboration spaces near kind of like these anchoring points on the floor where there were these architectural elements that provided some sort of privacy or stability. So I think, it'll be interesting to see the evolution of open collaboration as a space because I think it's still valid, but maybe not in the way that it was like pre-pandemic where we had lounge and sofas and just kind of sprawled out and open where everyone could see you. I think people are still kind of looking for that casual experience. And one way that we're seeing some of our customers accommodate this casual experience is kind of grounding it more so in the floor plan of providing some sort of structure or some sort of architectural privacy element, which is really interesting. But another thing here within what we're looking at within the data is that, this is a targeted subset of 8 hours of a day. And so we're looking at the window here from 10 to 2 where, the pressure comes quite high for these enclosed collabs and enclosed focus spaces. Meanwhile, the desks are still quite low. So again, that desk demand is pretty low while we have like these spikes. And again, it kind of comes back to, is your strategy to try to flatten some of these lines? So like, can you, have some sort of human intervention where you request teams, certain teams to book from like 8 to 10, the enclosed collabs, and then after 2 to 4. I'm kind of curious, like, how are people addressing some of this, from a timing perspective within the day? And then the next one, I think, is I think we get into the day of the week, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we got a really, really great question from Doug though
Okay,
here.
cool. Yeah.
With shortages all day, even for open focus, is that okay? Plan for. This is such an important question. It's a risk question that organizations need to kind of think for themselves, right? So, I might say I'm okay having shortages every Wednesday because that means my space has the right amount of tension between financially, what we spent on it and how many people we're assigning to it. Other companies that we work with, maybe it's, a couple days of the month they are okay with a shortage. It's a bit more of the higher budget, higher experience, right? Category. So it's something to watch. It's something to just be able to be aware of, right? I think as a starting point. And then really there is a question there of how do I align as an organization to whether this is an okay experience, whether my employees accept this experience, how often are we okay with it? So some of those things. Would be curious to hear from anyone on the line here, if or what your perspective is on that, right? Is it okay to have shortages? If so, how often? How many times a day? How many days of the week? Is that something that you would expect to occur in your workplace? Meanwhile, we've got the days of the week view of what we were just looking at. So again, open focus, lower on all of the days. And then we've got the Tuesday as really our highest, with just a slight decrease down Wednesday, Thursday for most of those different space categories. I don't, we don't often see a lot of surprises here on this pattern. I think everyone working in the current hybrid work world is kind of used to that Tuesday through Thursday
Yeah.
pattern.
Suzanne brings up she's surprised to see any shortages on Fridays, which is a
Yeah.
fair point. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I think it's all going to just, it's going to depend. We've got some of those in our benchmark. We do have some of those customers that are kind of playing with their supply demand in a way, and
Yeah.
they also have um, 5-day policies, right? So I think
Yeah.
that probably we're seeing that in the benchmark data. So of course this data for a lot of our customers individually might look a little bit different, less of that Friday shortage.
Yeah. And I think, like there's a trend
Yeah.
from 2023 to 2024 to 2025 here, and we don't have it visually represented, but this Monday is starting to backfill more. And so, I think, well, I would imagine that we'll see that Monday even tick up more this coming year, and almost be a little bit more flat going into Tuesday. Maybe not quite. I think Friday will still kind of be lagging behind, but it's kind of an interesting thing to keep an eye on too, that Monday is starting to become a little bit more in demand as those policies take place.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a great comment in here from Jessica.
Yeah,
I think, the key takeaway is that first sentence shortages are acceptable until they aren't, and calling out it often depends on the environment and the leader tolerances. Absolutely. I mean, I think that speaks very much to the conversations we were having about some of the CEO turnover also, and that's, creating some of the noise that impacts some of these things. Is a workplace team one year being told we can't have any friction in our space, people need to come in and just find it all the time. And then the next year we've got a different perspective, and it's we need to cut space, we need to make employees work in what we've got kind of thing. And both valid arguments for different reasons, but there's a lot of kind of cultural and environmental changes between those.
yeah. I like it. Jill's bringing in a great point here too, and just the uniqueness of our preferences. She's saying that she can't stand it if an office is too quiet. I'm the same. Like, if I'm going into the office, I kind of want some vibrancy or some sort of energy. I kind of like that coffee shop vibe. But then she's also talking about the accessibility to tools, like if there's a second monitor available for work, and how that will actually dictate where she goes within the floor. So, and some confirmation bias here, but thank you, Helen. Monday is about the same as Tuesday through Thursday for them. So, very cool. All right. And we have the takeaway now for,
All right.
uh,
Yeah, so um really to sum this up, right? There's a impact of designing for the human and all of the mess and the, unpredictable behavior and the variance and all of these good things and a bunch of people coming together making their own choices, designing for that versus the version of reality that really only exists on a spreadsheet, right? So in the past, when we really did expect everybody to be in here 5 days a week and be at their own desk, becomes a little bit easier to design for that spreadsheet-based model, because we've given less paths, less options for people to take. Not to say that things were perfect when we were when more of us were planning in that way,